Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to the first of what will hopefully be many monthly shows here going forward on Sea of Tranquility. I want to welcome Mr. Phil Aston from Now Spinning Magazine as my co-host going forward on this new show, which is going to be called Songs That Define a Guitar Player. All right, so this is Phil's idea, and it's a really, really good one. And kind of the concept here is that each episode, we will take turns picking out 10 guitar players that we really like and respect a lot. And each one of us then is going to have to think of one song for each player that really defines them as a guitar player. Now, Phil and I were just chatting off camera about how difficult this is, but what we want to stress here is that these are songs that we feel, each one of us individually feel, really defines that guitar player and their style and their character. Not the most well-known songs, not the most popular songs, or the biggest hits or whatever. These are songs that really define their style and what they do and all those things. So Phil, welcome to the show. And again, thanks for this idea. I think this is going to be really cool. I don't know if you want to expand on that, kind of the theory behind this at all, because it was your idea.
Yes, it's going to be a track that it could be the track that you play the most that features this guitar player, or one that has a special connection to you in your life. Because we're going to pick guitarists where it will be so obvious to think of the songs that always appear on those compilations or the best of these bands. But so some of them might be those tracks, but a lot of them will not be those tracks. So you can expect some surprises.
Yeah, I would think so. With all that being said, I will have Phil kick us off with our first guitar player, and he'll give his song choice, and I'll give mine, and we'll kind of go back and forth till we get through.
Okay, well, I'm going for an obvious one, first of all, hence the T-shirt, and it's going to be Richie Blackmore from Deep Purple, and it is from that period. Now, I said on a recent show with you, Pete, that my favorite Deep Purple album is Burn, and my favorite track by Deep Purple is Burn. So I could have quite easily have picked that track as the defining moment that encompasses all that is Blackmore. It has the riff, it has the solo, the neoclassical song structure, but it's not that. And in fact, with Deep Purple, you could say the first track on side one of every album would probably make the ultimate compilation album.
Yeah.
But I've picked the last track on side 2 of Burn. And I've picked A200, which is going to surprise most of the people on the planet, because it's not the best song technically. It sounds like some kind of outtake from a sci-fi movie from the 70s, and there's no lyrics on it. It almost sounds as if they weren't quite sure how to end the album. But I feel the guitar solo on A200, the way it comes in, defines to me Blackmore's emotive approach to structuring a guitar solo in such a way. Maybe it's the chord sequence behind from John Lord, but it just sounds to me so powerful. And of course, in 1974 to 76, he was doing that really fast playing on one string as his style was changing during this period. And this solo, as it comes out of that first, as I say, really emotive notes, it then goes into a flurry like water cascading down a mountain. The notes are just pouring out of the speakers, and it makes that track. And it's something that I think it also appeared on a Blackmore compilation from the Fan Club many years ago on the Connoisseur label. I think so. I don't think I'm the only person on planet Earth who probably does see this song as
there's
being
at least one or two others, Phil. Don't worry.
Yeah, there's one. Yeah, there's at least 2 of us. But I just feel that, it's 3 minutes, 50 seconds long. And some of it, you just wonder where it's going to go. It sounds a bit dated because of the synth sounds, but guitar wise, I just think it has one of Blackmore's best solos. And it is a track that I play for that sole reason.
Yeah, I never would have expected that in a million years. So good choice. But yeah, it's his playing on that is fantastic. I mean, Blackmore in general, especially early Blackmore, is to me one of the most intriguing guitar players of all time. I mean, he brings so much to the table, and the combination of influences that he utilizes is really like nobody else, which is why I'm glad you picked him, because it's one of my favorite players of all time. And anytime I can talk about Richie Blackmore, hey, it's a good thing. But trying to pick a defining song for him and his guitar style was, for me, very difficult because there's so many. You know, do you go rainbow? Do you go early purple, mid purple? Do you go, you know, the heavy stuff, the more bluesy stuff, the funky stuff? I mean, you know, the gothic stuff. I mean, you can go any which way. Shit, I could have even gone, you know, Blackmore's Night, right? He's done some good stuff there too. It's not that band is not really my cup of tea, but you know, he's got some good playing. So I said to myself, what are some of the things that are appealing to me about Richie Blackmore? He delivers some killer riffs, right? Well, he's one of those guys.
He's one of those guys.
His kind of sense of unpredictableness and danger that he brings to the table, and that blend of kind of like blues and classical or neoclassical that really, who else was really doing that at this time, right? Nobody. So I started picking out some songs and, you know, like you said, trying not to just automatically go to the usual favorites, right? Because that, you know, Burn came to mind for me as well. Child in Time came to mind for me as well. There's a lot of songs that instantly came to mind, Speed King and a bunch of others. And I said, well, but what song that's not Smoke on the Water is where kind of all these things happen and happen really, really well. And if you're going to kind of suggest something from this guy to someone who's never listened to Richie Blackmore or any of his bands before, what would be a good song? And I ultimately went with Highway Star, because Highway Star has those catchy, simple, chugging riffs. Okay. There's that pre-solo right before the big one that incorporates kind of the classical melodies, and he does the unison thing with John Lord. I mean, you gotta have that. I mean, that's John Lord's got to be part of the equation, right? When Lord kind of hand in hand. And then the actual solo in that song, which does some bluesy stuff. There's the neoclassical, and at the end of the song, he goes out in a blaze of glory with those rapid fire triplets. The tremolo picking. You mentioned the machine gun tremolo picking, right?
Yeah.
Nobody was doing that back then. Nobody. You know, it's like, you know, the one note or maybe two, you know, and it's just, and I remember I knew some folks back in the day when I was a kid who were like, he's really not all that talented. All he does is plays one note like a million times in a row and a million miles an hour. And I'm like, but you're picking on one little aspect of what he was doing. That's all. He's got so much else in his arsenal. And then at the end of the solo, he goes into those wild whammy bar things, right? Which frenzied stuff. So for me, I think Highway Star. It's not my favorite Deep Purple song. I mean, everybody loves Highway Star, but I think for me, it encapsulates everything that this guy is all about. The elements of danger, the blues, the neoclassical, the big, simple but crushing riffage, right? The theatricality of it all. Because, you know, when you listen to the whole solo, how well crafted and meticulous is that solo. And what's crazy, Phil, about Blackmore is you can always tell that on the studio albums, a lot of care went into creating those guitar solos, and they're so lyrical and unpredictable and perfect for the song. And then live, he would never play them the same ever like that, right?
Never. Yeah, absolutely.
Every show, right? So how crazy is that? Whereas other guitar players, they go to all these lengths to create these perfect solos, and then when they would play live, they're going to play them exactly as they are on the album. Blackmore didn't care about any of that stuff. He's like, whatever, you know, maybe I'll do that. I'll do that the same, but everything else, forget it, you know? So Highway Star is my pick for Richie Blackmore.
So Machine Head or Made in Japan version?
I'm glad you asked, Phil, because it's this one. I totally forgot to pull my props out because as much, and again, that goes back to what I was just talking about, right? So the studio version is a little bit different, maybe not massively so than the live version on here, but I think the live version on here, he just kind of goes for it even a little bit. There's, you know, the guitar solos on this album are different than their studio counterparts and arguably more incredible, right? I mean, Phil, I spent years throughout my childhood, I still do it to this day, comparing the solos on Child in Time on the In Rock album and this album, and they're both so mind-blowingly amazing, yet they're both so different, and to this day I still can't tell you which one I like more.
I would sign up to that club. I totally agree. They are perfect and totally different in that way as well. And
all right, now that we got the man out of the way, now we can
Yeah, we'll get the man out of the way. We'll go to another bloke. This is Ronnie Montrose. And again, there were many things I could have picked. The most obvious one, the pressure coming in from fans of Ronnie Montrose, will be Space Station #5. But again, I've picked a song that I play the most by Ronnie Montrose, and it's from the album Speed of Sound.
Oh, what a great album. Yeah.
And the track is 0G. And it's not a fast song, it's a slow song, but it has the perfect guitar tone to me. The way it comes in, it's like quadruple tracked guitars coming in. It's a guitar sound he kind of really defined from Gamma 2 to Gamma 3, and then probably he carried with him for the rest of his career. But I think on this album, which came out in the late 80s, when there were a lot of like guitar and instrumental albums coming out, which were really focused on seeing how fast you could play. I think Shrapnel Records had loads of them. But this one is very tasteful. It does have some lot of fast tracks on it, like Mach 1 opening track. But 0G, to me, just sums up that feel that Ronnie Montrose had in his playing. You know, he changed his style so much. Whereas we're talking about Blackmore, his style changed, but you could still feel or see the transition. Ronnie Montrose kind of seemed to flick a switch from one style to the next when he decided it was time to move on. And this was that really melodic but metallic sound that he had. So to me, 0G, if someone said to me, what's Ronnie Montrose really like outside of the riffs and the bombastic stuff with Hager on vocals, I would put 0G on as my moment.
Yeah, the sustained notes on that song and the tone, and it's just, again, there's nothing really fast on there, because he was like, I'm going to do an instrumental album because everybody's doing them, but I'm not going to do them like Satriani and Vi and Tony McAlpine and all those guys, right? Because he was never that guy. That's why I think, Phil, when that album first came out, I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, because, you know, you never thought that he was that type of guy to do an album like that. And it's interesting. I almost picked that song from that album here, but the reason I didn't is because I said, for me, I don't know if that really defines what he was all about. I'm not sure, right? I couldn't get past Rock the Nation, because, you know, you mentioned before how sometimes you have to go with the song that you play the most from the guy, right?
Yeah.
Rock the Nation is that song for me. I think it's the tone on this whole album, but the song is otherworldly, the big metallic riffing. There's always, even on Speed of Sound album, there's always this little underpinning of like heavy blues, right? There was always this blues in his playing. And on this album, you got the blues and you got a little bit of boogie, even though it doesn't really sound like boogie, but it's there. And the solo, which is very indicative of the early part of his career, the solo is really melodic. It's got a bluesy feel, and it's short and it's sweet, and it's for the song. I mean, Ronnie rarely ever went for long guitar solos in the 70s, right? It wasn't until that album where he started stretching out a little bit more. And I just think, when I think Ronnie Montrose, and if I'm going to say to someone who's never heard of Ronnie Montrose, okay, here's a song you need to listen to, this is the essence of this guy, I'm going to go Rock the Nation every time. Just such a kick-ass song, and such an important, I mean, he is such an important part of the emergence of American hard rock and heavy metal. So important, and he doesn't get the kind of the credit that he's due for that, I think. So yeah, Rock the Nation is my pick.
It's my go-to. If the house was on fire, that would be the album I would rescue. I think the first Montrose album is something that every home should have on their shelf somewhere. Totally. Yeah,
for sure.
Right, my next one is Bill Nelson. And this is from the album Sunburst Finish from 1976. And it was a B-side of a single called Ships in the Night. And the song is called Crying to the Sky. And I picked this one because it sounds, the guitar solo, there's two of them in the song, both of them are just as emotive, but it sounds like Bill is barely controlling the guitar. The feedback is just edging in and out of where the notes are going to be, and it is so emotional. Just the sound, it just fits in, you know, the whole production of this song. I mean, it's not my favorite Bebop Deluxe album. I'm not a huge fan overall of the band, but this song and that guitar solo, both of them, I think there was nothing else like it. It was huge, big, wide, fat sound. But that it's the way that he controls the feedback in a studio situation, that it sounds like it was just done in the moment, and he was really connected to lyrically what the song was about. Just sounds fantastic.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Great song. It's funny when you talk about Bill Nelson, never judge a book by its cover, right? You look at the guy and he doesn't look like a guitar hero at all, right? And sometimes you listen to some of the music of Bebop Deluxe, you're like, this is not guitar hero music. And then all of a sudden a solo comes in, you're like, whoa, where'd that come from? And he's playing like a 335, right? And you mentioned the feedback. The stuff that this guy did on that big semi hollow body guitar was like amazing. This was another tough one, because there were a couple of, I thought about yours as well. There were a couple that really came to mind. And then I was like, I kind of honed in on one song, and I was like, well, but the live version is the one that I have to pick. And that is Adventures in a Yorkshire Landscape from Live in the Air Age.
That's a great choice.
Oh, man. First of all, the solo goes from like 30 or 40 seconds on the studio album to like 4 minutes on here, longer. You talk about just absolutely wonderful melodic phrasing. This guy was on another level, and nobody ever talks about him. Nobody. I mean, that technique,
brilliant choice.
Blazing speed, matched with just pure class. I mean, there's in this solo, there's hard rock, there's fusion, there's blues, and it's all wrapped up just perfectly together. And the more I listen to this band and this guy, because I didn't get to Bebop Deluxe till maybe 10 years ago. I mean, I think I had the album you showed, Sunburst Finish. I had that back in the 90s, but I never got anything else until like maybe 10 years ago. And I've gotten everything now. And the more I listen to this guy, the more I'm like, man, this is the most criminally underrated guitar player that ever lived. It's just so amazing. And then, you listen to Prince, and you listen to Prince's guitar playing, and there is no way that Prince was not listening to Bill Nelson, because there are so many similarities in their styles. And
good observation.
Regardless of what you think about Bebop Deluxe, their music is quirky. It's kind of weird. Every album sounds completely different than the next. They don't really fit into any kind of box, categorically speaking. But man, this guy was a serious player. And if anybody has not heard Adventures in a Yorkshire Landscape, specifically from this album, the live album, it is like 9 minutes of absolute beauty, and the technique of this guy is just jaw-droppingly good. So amazing. So that is my choice for Bill Nelson.
That would have been my second choice. Absolutely classic track, and that's a brilliant live album. Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Right, my next one is a bit not as far back into the past, and it's Derek Trucks, and it's from the album Songlines, this one. And it's a track, probably a song title I have trouble pronouncing. It's Sahib Terry Bandi Maki Munnai, I think. And I got into Derek Trucks because he became part of the Allman Brothers band. And I remember watching him on a DVD called Eric Clapton's Crossroads concerts. And this guy with the long blonde hair just kind of rocking backwards and forwards with his eyes closed. And I just became like, well, who is he? And so I started to buy some of his at this point the Derek Trucks band, and I'd never heard anything quite like this. It was like, I mean, playing slide guitar has kind of fallen away from being a popular choice of guitar styles, from the 80s onwards, really. But this guy was creating music that sounded like it was world music, something Peter Gabriel might be involved with. It had blues in there, but it had like Afro-Caribbean and, almost Aboriginal stuff going on. Also funk, jazz fusion, prog, everything stirred into a big pot. And there seemed to be no restrictions on where the track was going to end or start. It would suddenly just zoom off. I think it's also on here, this live album, Live in Georgia. And I just fell in love with his style on that track. And it's got like an earworm type riff as well that just goes round and round in your head. It's one of those, a bit like Return to Forever would have done on their Romantic Warrior album. You think it's just a massive notes and instrumental tracks, but you walk away and there are bits of it still playing in your head for weeks. Well, Derek Trucks does that. It just has this kind of like relaxed style that feels like just effortless. And he's not like a guitar hero with us throwing all the shapes, waving his arms around. He's just stood on a carpet with his eyes closed in the zone. Like, he's unique, and I just love everything he does. But that was a defining moment for his music for me, and it's still my favorite album. But that is the track, which is nearly 10 minutes long, that I play the most.
He's always so melodic, always. I've had the pleasure of seeing him live numerous times, and I caught him when he was a teenager opening up for Government Mule on his first tour. So when that first album came out, and I remember thinking, I didn't, again, this was kind of right at the beginning of the internet days, right? So it's not like I really knew who he was. I knew the last name, right? And I was like, Derek Trucks, is he Butch's son, right? Because I was a big Allman Brothers fan for many, many years, and I found out he was his nephew. And I remember seeing this kid live, and I was like, holy cow, listen to that slide playing. And even when he's not playing slide, he's really, really good, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then I caught him in the Allman Brothers Band many, many times, and just blew me away every single time. So this, for me, Phil, this proved to be the hardest one to pick because
I'm not surprised.
There's so many live albums, there's the studio albums, there's, do you pick Allman's, do you pick Derek Trucks Band, do you pick Tedeschi Trucks Band, right? Because there's some really good stuff on those albums too. And I was like beating myself up trying to figure out, something from one of the Derek Trucks Band albums. And there's so much good stuff. And ultimately it kept coming back to me. And I'm like, well, what kind of is what really showed me a lot from this guy? And I think that it takes a lot of courage and a lot of balls to be that guy in the Allman Brothers Band when essentially what you're doing is you're playing the part of a guy named Duane Allman, right? Even though he's been gone for so many years. And I think that, Warren Haynes is another guy. Maybe we'll do him next month because he's another one. But I think that I kept coming back to Desdemona from the Hit in the Note album.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
This is the only studio album for the Allman Brothers Band that he appeared on. And I remember when this came out, this is a great album.
Yeah, it is.
And I have forever been so sad that they didn't do another studio album with this same lineup. This would be it. And then they just kept touring and never did another album. And then Greg passed away, and that was that. But man, Desdemona is so good. Because it's everything that the Allman Brothers are all about, but then B, it just reminds me so much of classic Allman Brothers Band, where you would have Dickie come in and play a solo, which is amazing, and then Duane would play a slide solo, and you'd be like, oh my god, that's even more face melting. And that's what this is all about. I mean, he comes in and plays this slide solo that, like, you're almost like you're listening to it. It's like, is he actually using a slide? Because the way he uses a slide is different than most guys. And it's like, and it's he's got his amplifier on high gain. So like every time he hits a note, you hear this kind of roar that comes behind it. And it's fast, but it's tasty and melodic. And then when he's done, he basically kind of turns the nod over to Warren. Then Warren comes in with this really tasty kind of bluesy, jazzy thing. And they complement each other so well. And that's the feel I always got when I saw him live with the Allman Brothers Band. It was always just these two guys just making magic. And I think that if you want to know what this guy is all about, the fire, the finesse, the emotion, and that whole kind of go for the throat feel that he does so effortlessly, Desdemona is the song for me.
I think that's a brilliant choice. And actually, I think Hitting the Note would be my top 5 Allman Brothers albums. I think people always look back to the past thinking it was never, the original lineups. But I think Hitting the Note literally hits all the notes. It's a brilliant album.
Yeah. Not to go off on a tangent, but I remember when I did a ranking the albums of the Allman Brothers Band a while back here on the channel, I found that really, really difficult because, I mean, nobody loves those first 2-3 albums more than me, right? They're amazing. Yeah. But man, every album they did since the reunion in 1990 was amazing. Yeah. And arguably as good as any of those early albums. I really had, because I almost felt like I was betraying the history of the band by not picking the first 2 albums right at the top of my list. because I feel so strongly about this and Seven Turns and Shades. I mean, all those albums, their 4 studio albums are so good. And I'm like, holy, regardless of whether it's Dickie playing or Warren or it doesn't matter. They're great. And Greg never sounded better. And yeah, I mean, for anybody watching, if you've not listened to any of the Allman Brothers Band albums from 1990 and on, man, are you missing out.
Oh yeah, totally. What's the second one after Seven Turns? Shades of Two Worlds, was it?
Shades of Two Worlds. Yep.
Oh, that to me would be, it's just immaculate.
Yeah,
it's just perfect.
So good. And all the live albums they put out in that time period are just like, geez, so good. So
yeah.
Anyway, I'll get off my Allman Brothers soapbox here, but yeah, Derek Trucks, amazing player.
Right. Next one is Leslie West, whose back catalogue goes back into the 60s and all the way up into most recent years when he sadly passed away. His tone, we're talking about a man that only has a fantastic and unique guitar tone that used this power without having lots of speed, but also had a fantastic voice as well. So again, like a lot of the people we've mentioned, there were so many places to jump off or land. So I decided to land in 1972 with West Bruce and Lane from Why Don't You? And the track I chose was Love Is Worth the Blues, which is on side 2. And I chose this because of the riff. The riff is really metallic and powerful. Leslie West's vocals are just drenched in gritty blues, but it's the guitar solo that's like, it starts with this rhythm downward scale, literally going from like A, G, F to E, fantastic guitar sound. And as he does that, Jack Bruce is going in the opposite direction up his SG bass, and it comes to this climax of a guitar solo that's it's not fast, but it sounds faster than it is because it's a flurry of really high notes as the guitars and the bass all race to reach the top of the mountain. And it's just breathtaking to me. And the way it comes out of that, and he does that kind of like slide up the guitar, a bit like Billy Gibbons did on Give Me All Your Loving at the start of that song. It's really raw. And that to me sums up the power. I mean, there's so many things I got to pick up just off this. It's not a perfect album, like a lot of albums in this period, that we've done a fast one, so we'll do a slow one. But like Why Don't You? It must be one of the first songs with that downward chug, 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 metal type riff. But that to me just brings in his voice, his guitar, his rhythm playing, everything. Leslie West.
How important was this guy to like kind of metal and proto metal, man? I mean, Jesus. I mean, I love Leslie West. I'm a riff guy, Phil, and I always gravitate towards these guys that just have this ability to create these big, humongous, chunky, crunchy, munchy riffs. And man, Leslie West is one of the best. This was another hard one because I changed my mind on this 3 times and went with some songs that are more of my favorites. And then I came back and I'm like, what song defines Leslie West? Mississippi Queen. It's obvious, but I kept coming back to it. I had never in my life up until like yesterday. And I was like, because I love that song. And man, but then when it came back, it's just like, man, Mountain's signature song is Leslie West defined. It's heavy, it's monstrous, the distorted tone, the big riff of doom. It's simple. And then that sizzling, stabbing lead guitar work, which is always so melodic. I mean, Leslie was like, I'm not going to play a million notes. I'm going to play 10, and you're going to remember every one of them. And that's the important thing. I mean, is there anything sweeter sounding than Leslie, a little Gibson guitar, right? In Leslie's huge hands, always sounding so powerful and majestic. And again, one of those guys that when he solos, less is more. And that defines Leslie West. And there's a reason why guys like Michael Schenker and so many others have cited him as, one of their favorite guitar players of all time, because he's always so melodic. He cranks out these big riffs. He can get bluesy, he can get jazzy if he wants. And it almost kind of pained me to pick Mississippi Queen because it is so expected, but yet, and it's not my favorite Mountain song. I love it, but how can you not? Right? It's just like,
good,
I had to go with it. That's probably as predictable as I'm going to be today, but yeah.
No, but you have picked 2 opening songs with cowbell on.
Oh yeah,
Rock the Nation.
cowbell's important too. Gotta have it. Gotta have it. You know, it's like you hear that first riff, you hear the cowbell, then you hear the riff, you instantly know who it is, right?
You do, you do
So
indeed.
iconic.
Right, my next guitarist is probably may not be as expected. It's Lindsey Buckingham from Fleetwood Mac, and it's from an album that I don't play really apart from this song, and it's Fleetwood Mac Live, and the track is "I'm So Afraid," which was tucked away towards the end of side 4, I think. And I picked this. It's Lindsey Buckingham sings it. It's like a blues song, and it has a guitar solo where you can almost imagine him teetering on the edge of the stage, almost falling into the audience. It's just, again, it starts on a lower register. It's not fast. It's really heartfelt. We've picked a lot of guitarists that have not played millions of notes, but all the notes that they played, as you just mentioned, are on target, all of them. And on this solo, it just builds and builds and builds, and it goes higher and higher to the point where he breaks one of the guitar strings, and that's really where it comes to an end. But I just feel the guitar solo, and I'm So Afraid by Lindsey Buckingham, shows him in a light that no other song in this period of Fleetwood Mac's history or back catalogue shines a light on it like this song. It's unique, I think. And it has to be this version for me, the live one. It's just the guitar solo, just as I said, it's just so emotional, and you can just close your eyes and see him, like with his own eyes closed, just lost in a world in front of thousands of people, probably literally just teetering on the edge of that stage. It's a great track.
Yeah, a great player, a good choice. And again, I think a really unique player, right? I mean, he's not like anybody else we're talking about today. So again, another kind of tough one, because Lindsey plays really for the band, and he's never been that I'm the guitar hero type of guy, right? So I started thinking, well, what are some of the characteristics that we all look for, and myself, specifically look for in a great Lindsey Buckingham song? And it's like, I think that the layerings that he does, I mean, I don't know too many other guitar players who work quite so well with layering, like acoustic and electric textures for this really rich, full sound. And then as far as guitar solos go, it's very lyrical. And he puts together guitar solos that are very melodic and very memorable. So I started thinking, well, someone who does that really well, the effect is on the listener, whether you're a guitar player or not, is that you can probably hum every single note in that guitar solo like you would a vocal line or a vocal melody, right? So I started thinking, and it kept taking me back to one song. In this song, it's got classic rock riffs and chords. You got the acoustic guitar underneath, the electric, real lush and majestic. I had to go with "Go Your Own Way."
Yes, good one.
The little singing lead fills that are just throughout the song, but never overstepping his and Stevie and Christine's vocal lines, right? But you could tell they're waiting to be unleashed. The whole song, he's playing these little bits, just waiting to kind of, all right, I'm going to come out soon, but we're not quite done singing yet. And then when he does step into the spotlight, the solo is highly melodic. The phrasing is great. And he's the master of the slow build, right? Because it starts one way. Each note is hit perfectly. Again, less is more, but the notes are singing, they're ringing, just kind of like the vocals in the song, right? So to me, it's almost like the guitar solo is just another vocal line, except not sung by a person, right? But like, think about it. Like, everybody who's watching, try and all of a sudden in your head hum along to the guitar solo and "Go Your Own Way." You could probably do it instantly, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, like "Stairway to Heaven" or, any number of great guitar solos, right? It's so wonderful. And even though it's short and brief and to the point, I've heard this song a million times, and every time it still sounds fresh to me, and I wait for that guitar solo. And then when it comes on, I'm kind of like, so a great player. Probably doesn't get enough credit that he deserves, but an integral part of this band. And I think, to me, "Go Your Own Way" is Lindsey Buckingham. That's what he's all about. So that's my choice.
It's a brilliant choice, because again, we've picked a lot of guitarists that don't, as Tommy Bolin used to say, blow all their cookies in the first 10 bars or something, where everyone used to start really fast and there's like nowhere else to go. We're picking a lot of songs where the guitarist plays starts in the lower register, so there's plenty of room for them to explore and maneuver and go somewhere else. And Go Your Own Way is a perfect example of that. It's a great track. Right, my next one was actually more difficult than I thought it was going to be, without being too obvious. And I don't think there's any problem with being obvious with Eddie Van Halen at all, because I thought, well, it's got to be Eruption. But I thought I wanted to try and think of what song do I play the most that really shows a different slant to him. And I've decided to pick the album Fair Warning. And I've gone with the opening track, Mean Street, and the reason is that up to this point, I mean, Van Halen, first Van Halen was, everything about them is classic. They're a party band. All the songs are all about having a great time. There's something about Fair Warning, especially the opening track, became far darker and more serious. But the opening riff was very different, very complex, unique. But it was his, whereas everything else up to this point by Ed Van Halen had been lots of notes, really about being the focus of being the guitar hero. I felt there's a lot more restraint on this album, and especially this track. And the bit that really to this day really excites me is the last minute and a half as it goes towards the end, and that build up and his imagination, where you have like a one note riff towards the end, where it's just dun 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 dun, and then the other guitars are kind of building up around it as it starts to move towards the fade. And that to me is just genius. He could have just filled that with millions of notes, but he didn't. It's just a rhythm, it's just a groove that if they decided to just keep the faders up for another 2 minutes, that would have still sounded absolutely brilliant to me. So that's my choice of Eddie.
All right, who's keeping score at home? Ding ding, first match of the day. One of the things Phil and I joked about when we talked about doing this series is that we were excited to see, because we don't compare notes, to see how many times we pick the same songs. And it's the first episode, so I wasn't sure. And amazing, we're like 3/4 of the way through, and this is only the first time we've duplicated. I mean, and I changed my pick to Mean Streets yesterday. I had all week long, I had somebody get me a doctor. And the more I kind of thought about it, I think for me, Mean Streets just has everything that Eddie was all about. I mean, he doesn't get enough credit for his rhythm guitar playing. I mean, these super metallic, crisp riffs are just incredible in this song. You get, and as far as soloing goes, every trick in the book that he has is in this song. But like you mentioned, it's not overly flashy. He's done the overly flashy thing. This is pretty economical, but like in a short span, he does the fast tremolo picking, the pinch harmonics, the whammy bar stuff, the note slurring, the acrobatic stuff, the tapping. I mean, it's all here.
It's all there, yeah. It's everything
all here, but it's like it's a darker, more serious tone of the song, as is a good amount of this album. And like I said, I could have gone so many other ways, because Van Halen is almost every song is a defining moment for him. But I think for me, it just always seems to come back to this song. This to me is one of the great Van Halen tracks of all time, and it's all due to him, right? Because it's just everything he does on here is just so spot on. So so Phil and I duplicate with Mean Streets.
Brilliant. Right, the next one I put on the list because I was just trying to think as many guitarists I could think, covering lots of different ports of call on the rock or jazz or any kind of arena. And Lee Ritenour is one of my favorite guitarists. He's a jazz fusion player. He's done lots of things. He was more jazz fusion in the 70s. In the 80s, he experimented with lots of almost like Brazilian kind of samba type music, and then and now he does lots of pure kind of jazz stuff as well. But so picking something that would define him, actually, I myself found really difficult. But there was one album he made in the mid 80s called Banded Together, which is a good entry point for anybody. This is probably his most rock centric one. You can tell from the guitar pose that he was.
I've never heard that album.
This is my favorite album by him. And it's probably the one with the most fiery guitaring on it. It's almost as if he thought, well, I just want to show the people out there that if I was going to play rock music, I can do it. And it kind of turns into almost like a prog rock jazz album from the mid 80s. out of time compared with what else was going on around him, and especially even other people like him. And after this didn't sell, he steered back towards almost pure jazz. But this has got some great tracks on it. But it's the last track on side 2. I could have picked Richt Variations 2, which is a song title he uses a lot when he's experimenting. But Heavenly Bodies, on the last track on side 2, is very melodic, very soft, lots of like sax and solos on it. So, but he's playing on it itself is just beautiful. It's just a wonderful album. It's got some very dated kind of drum sounds and stuff, as you'd expect from that period, as the percussion is like in your face. But but his guitar playing he really shows like if he had gone down the prog kind of jazz fusion route and turned everything up to 11, this is what it would have sounded like. So that's my Lee Ritenour moment.
I've never heard that album, and he's got so many albums. I think one of the my frustrations with Lee Ritenour, I've been a fan for forever. He's got a lot of albums, and man, he just kind of he goes down these weird paths a lot. Like he went through a number of years where he was doing like mostly acoustic, kind of like Brazilian stuff.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of real kind of saccharine-y, smooth jazz stuff, which is like it's okay, but it's
I know
his 70s stuff is pretty interesting and pretty good. And then he did some collaboration albums. He did an album with Larry Carlton in the 90s, which actually was very, very good. But I haven't really kept up with him in more recent years, but he's just got so much stuff. And I've seen him live. He's great live. He's a great player. He's one of the most, I think, tasteful and melodic guys out there, who's playing in this kind of like jazz fusion type of thing. But I went, to me, this was kind of a no-brainer for me. I decided to go to the title track to Captain Fingers. Again, maybe not indicative of what he did afterwards, right? I think like this album and maybe one or two others in the 70s was kind of an anomaly for him because he never really went back to do this type of thing again. But, you know, much like Larry Carlton, he has the ability to make his guitar solos, you know, sing. There's a pop sensibility in everything that he plays. So it's like pop phrasing within a jazz fusion framework type of thing. But I mean, on this album, he shows some blazing technique, especially on this song here. It's almost like he's paying homage to the greats like, you know, Wes Montgomery, George Benson, and Grant Green. I mean, he does, you know, you know, and he does all these real fast little speedy runs on, you know, whatever he was playing. I think he also played 335s at this time, or Les Paul.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
And it's just amazing. And again, this is so long ago, and this whole album is very. There's this kind of term that they've used here called like West Coast fusion, right? The California fusion sound. You know, Tom Scott and the LA Express and whatever. Yeah. And Lee Ritenour had that thing too. It's kind of smooth jazz. It's kind of pop, but it's got like a fiery fusion thing going on underneath. Really cool album. Really great player. I've never like I said, I've never fully adopted a lot of his repertoire because he's just kind of all over the place. And many years he did that kind of acoustic thing. And I'm just not a big acoustic guitar fan anyway. But the guy's an amazing player, so lyrical, so melodic. And Captain Fingers title track is my pick for Lee Ritenour.
Fantastic. Right. Next one brings me back up to the kind of Purple family. And it's Tommy Bolin. And again, Tommy Bolin had such a varied and short career, but he really was an innovator. There's so many places that could have gone, and there aren't many guitarists who could literally play jazz, funk, heavy metal, prog, anything, acoustic, and of course he sang as well. And so there were lots of places I could have landed for Tommy Bolin. And I have chosen a track from Teaser. And this was difficult because I thought he's a great vocalist, so I should really pick a song where he sings on it, but I couldn't. I felt like it had to be Homeward Strut, because it just brings together a bunch of talents, and his approach to music that is just totally unique. It's a song that is funky, as a great funk, rhythm and riff, but also has like a prog rock kind of a metallic riff in the middle. This guitar soloing has like the production, the kind of metal chords that come in and out. it's just, there's nothing else like this. And this album had got everything on it. Even got reggae on the first track side too, with People. So he was trying to tick every single box, which of course we know the danger for any musician that does that is they end up ticking no boxes because they turn off some of their key audience. But I think with this album, as the years have rolled by, people can stare at it now and listen to it and think, this has got everything on it. You can listen to this as a whole. But I think that song defines this album and defines what was going on with Tommy Bolin. He was on the copy I've got here, it says guitarist of Deep Purple at the bottom, which he'd only, this had already happened. But of course, this just married so well together in 1975 with Come Taste the Band, and this came out. It could have really launched him as a real name. But of course, substance abuse took the story in a different route. But that track, Homeward Strut, there's others, I know people watching this are going, why didn't you pick X, Y, and Z? But Homeward Strut, I think, sums up his originality in the way he played outside of the normal, typical rock genre. Because I think other guitarists couldn't have done Homeward Strut. It's unique to Tommy Bolin.
Yeah, it's a great song from a really good album. It's my favorite of the two solo albums. A lot of variety on there. Yeah, this was another tough one because you're not looking at a massive amount of records, right? Or songs. And then I was like, well, do anything for me anyway? Do any of the material in the two solo albums define him, or does some of these great appearances as a sideman define him? Right?
Yeah.
Because, of course, there's the one album he did with Purple. He did the two albums with the James Gang, which are both terrific. And then there's some other appearances here and there, right? So I ultimately decided to go with Quadrant 4 from Billy Cobham's Spectrum, which, I mean,
yeah,
who better to pair up this guy with than the rumbling, acrobatic Billy Cobham on drums and Jan Hammer on keyboards. And man, right from the get-go on Quadrant 4, you get that kind of cascading keyboard lick from Jan Hammer, the drumming, and then he just comes in with this solo that I think encapsulates you mentioned it before, everything that he does so well. Rock and blues and jazz and heavy metal and all in one, and funk. And I mean, it's just, he throws it all in there. And then the way this guy uses like all the effects at his disposal, right? So he's cranking on the wah-wah, like midway during the song, he steps on the wah-wah, and it's just like, holy cow. He uses the Echoplex. He uses some kind of weird phaser effect, right? Or maybe it's a flanger. I'm not quite sure exactly what he used. He's got the speedy triplets that he's just wailing on. Then the whammy bar stuff at the end, and the whole solo has so much groove. I mean, it's a complete monster of a solo. And there's a reason why when this album came out, people were like, who the hell is this Tommy Bolin guy? And where can I hear more of him? And then he did like the exact same thing on the Alphonse Mouzon album.
Yeah, Mind Transplant. Yeah.
And then before you know it, I mean, you see he's everywhere, right? He's James Gang, it goes to Deep Purple, right? And then he's released two solo albums, he's gone. Just like that. So, I mean, I agree with that. I think one of the true devastating losses for rock music in the 70s due to substance abuse issues, because this guy kind of had it all. And did we ever really hear the fullest extent of his talents? I'd argue probably not.
Totally agree. Yeah.
Quadrant 4 was once I really sat down and thought about it, I was like, it's got to be that song. It's got to be that song. I almost, because you can arguably go a couple songs on Come Taste the Band, because there's some really good stuff on there. Anything on Teaser is worth picking. And I'd argue that first James Gang album that he's on, it also has some serious stuff. But yeah, Quadrant 4 from Billy Cobham Spectrum is my pick for Tommy Bolin.
Well, he had that kind of, as you say, the effects, like the kind of volume control he had on Standing in the Rain from the James Gang. He used that at the start of Stratus.
Yep.
He used similar sounds, but I think Come Taste the Band is the album that got me into jazz, because from there I read that David Coverdale had listened to Spectrum by Billy Cobham, and I went and took a chance on the Billy Cobham album and put that on, expecting to hear. I didn't, as far as I was concerned, I didn't do jazz. So I put that on and I thought, this is jazz. It was just absolutely amazing. Of course, Stratus has the grooviest bass riff ever hidden amongst it, which has been sampled so many times. But it's a brilliant album. I think it also influenced Jeff Beck to do Blow by Blow, didn't it? I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the not the rumor has it, but it's apparently been said that the reason that Jeff Beck decided to go down the fusion route is listening to Tommy Bolin. I mean, he's like, wow, I want to do that, right? So why not?
Yeah.
I'm a rock guy, I'm a blues guy. I can do that too. And he did it very well as well.
So for my final choice, I'm going with a UK band called Free, and it's Paul Kossoff, and the album is Free Live from 1971. For all of you watching out there, the CD remaster has got a better sound than the vinyl, I have to say. But the track is Mr. Big. Now, I heard this on the radio in the UK. I was surrounding myself with lots of records. I was really into speed. I was listening to Blackmore, Jimmy Page. The faster a guitarist could play, to me, meant they were better. That was just where I was. So at that time, and there's a guy called Alan Freeman in the UK, who was a famous DJ at the time, and he said, I'm going to play a track now by Free called Mr. Big. And I didn't know much about them at all, apart from the single All Right Now. And this song comes on, and it's quite slow paced, and it builds up. And I really love Paul Rodgers' voice. It was sounding really angst driven, and it pulled me in. And it comes to a point where you just know in a rock song, it's going to be after the second chorus, there's going to be probably a guitar solo now. And there is. And instead of starting as my mind thought guitar solo should start, it started with one note in the same key of the song. And immediately I was just captured by it. And it was just so emotive, so emotional, that I'd never heard anyone play like this at the time. I was just surrounded, as I said, by speed guitarists. And that's what I thought. I was playing guitar myself at the time. And I thought, I need to be able to play faster than anyone else. That's what you do. And this guy was doing the complete opposite of that. And he just went up to the higher register, and all the notes were kind of like connected to the song, to the human heart. And obviously I found out afterwards they were like kids barely out of their teens. And I saw a video of him at the Isle of Wight, just leaning against his Marshall stack, playing these notes with his Gibson Les Paul. And I became a massive Paul Kossoff fan, because it was not about the note. I realized there was another approach to playing guitar that was about using the guitar, like you mentioned earlier. It's like it's saying words without being the vocalist. It's kind of like it's following on from the lyrics, but using the guitar to express what you can't say in words. And that, to me, is what Paul Kossoff did. And to this day, that is the definitive version of Mr. Big. And it obviously moves into a bass solo by Andy Fraser, but that to me is the definitive. If you've never heard of Paul Kossoff, play that track.
When you pulled out the Free Live album, I was like, oh, are we going to do it again? Not quite. I'm also going to go to the Free Live album for Mr. Kossoff. For me, it's Moonshine.
Oh,
I mean, I get chills every time I hear this guitar solo. So, of course, this is the lengthier version of Moonshine. It's kind of like a dark, slow blues, right? But his solo on here is a thing of beauty. I mean, this guy says more with just a couple of notes and that vibrato than anybody else does. You know, I mean, just most guys will need 100 to say what they want to say. This guy's like, I got 5 or 10 that'll slay it. Trust me. And that Les Paul tone, you know, Les Paul into a Marshall. That's it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Don't need anything else.
Yeah.
It's frighteningly good. And this is one of those perfect examples. I love a slow build solo, right? He builds and builds and builds. I think the solo is like 3.5 minutes or something like that. And it comes to an absolutely sizzling climax. And man, the bends and the vibrato, it's just absolutely spine tingling. And that's what this guy was all about. He wasn't flashy. He could be flashy if he wanted to, but that's not his thing. It's just this gutsy tone, the vibrato, unlike anybody else. And again, Les Paul into a Marshall, done. And within like kind of like a blues rock framework. And just, I mean, not much better pairing a guitar player like this with Paul Rodgers. I mean, those guys were so good together. And an amazing player. Another one of those guys that is one of the greats of the early 70s, kind of like British blues rock scene, that I think, you know, never really got the due he deserved, and another guy who was taken from us because of, you know, addiction issues and whatnot. So a great shame.
But you're right about there couldn't be a better connection, combination of Rodgers and Kossoff at that time, because you get a feel with a lot of bands, especially for, to me, from the 80s, where it was almost like theatrical, where the guitarist was very flash and they would do their bit and then the vocals would come back in. There's something about free live, and especially on the track you mentioned as well, where Paul Rodgers is feeding and feeling off the guitar playing. So when at the end of Mr. Big, the example I chose, Rodgers' voice as he comes in for the last part of the song is because of what he's felt from the guitar solo and obviously Andy Fraser's bass, that they're all feeding off each other. You know, the energy of these four young kids, really.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know, the maturity in their playing that to this day still sounds, you know, absolutely epic. But yeah, Moonshine is a great track as well.
You bring up a good point.
Which is why the CD version's better than the, in a way.
Oh yeah, it's got the extra tracks. It sounds great. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point. There's something to be said about, and you saw it a lot back then, but when there was this connection between like a lead guitar player and the singer, that when they had the magic going and they fed off each other, right? I mean, you saw it with like certainly Blackmore and Gillan, even though they hated each other, right? But they had a connection on stage. You know,
they did.
Daltrey and Townsend, right?
Yep.
Page and Plant. I mean, and these two guys, that's when the magic really happened. And once that kind of breaks, it's never quite the same again, right? So
yeah, that's very, very true. So that's my 10 choices for this first episode.
Cool. So for everybody watching, you've got all the guitar players. List your pick for the defining song for that guitar player, and then tune in next month. Well, I will be picking 10 players. That Phil and I will do this exact same thing over. And like we said, there's an endless amount of choices. So we literally could be doing this monthly show for quite a long time from now. So this is pretty cool. And it's good to kind of like, I enjoy kind of thinking about this and trying to figure, you know, my picks out, because, you know, I mean, I love all these players. So this was kind of tough in some spots. In others, I kind of was drawn right to the song that I picked. So yeah. Phil, what's anything new you want to plug on Now Spinning?
Well, yeah, we've got quite a few new videos coming up, and in the UK, Now Spinning magazine is featured in the new Record Collector magazine, because we're doing a campaign to try and make new vinyl records coming polyline sleeves, because a lot of the production issues that we're getting over here is because of the way that they're being packaged. So that's really cool. And I've obviously got some, as I mentioned before, some good ranking videos up, because I'm starting to do some of those. And I'm aware that I'm behind with my Deep Purple live album ranking one, but there's just so many of them, as I've suddenly realized.
Yep.
But you can find me on the website nowspinning.co.uk, or on YouTube at Now Spinning Magazine with me, Phil Aston.
Cool. Sounds good.
And thanks very much, Pete. This has been absolutely fantastic.
This was lots of fun. And Phil and I will be back with Martin Popoff tomorrow for a very cool episode that just kind of came about a couple days ago, that we are going to take a look at the solo albums of the original 4 Black Sabbath members. Of course, Ozzy Osbourne, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. We're going to kind of take a look at the solo albums, and we're going to rank like which catalogs we like best, right? And kind of like what we did with recently with the Purple family tree. We're going to take these 4 guys' solo albums, and we're going to kind of talk about which catalogs we like the best and kind of rank them. So that's coming up tomorrow. Cool. In addition to, we got In the Prog Seat happening tomorrow as well. So lots going on here on the channel, and visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and click on that notification bell so you get alert of all of our content as it posts. And please do hit the like button before you leave. Tune in next month for another songs that define a guitar player, with 10 additional guitar players. And for Phil Aston, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.